Hi, I'm Shelby, and I'm going to be talking about living with the loss that comes from losing religion, losing faith. I think when you're told your entire life, from as early as you can remember, that you got eternity in the bag, you've got it made. You're going to live forever with your family and friends in a place of eternal, infinite joy where there's no suffering. That's so existentially soothing, but you have no idea that it's doing that for you because it's all you've ever known. So, for someone like me who lost their faith, deconstructed late in life, relatively, losing that leaves a massive hole. There was a void for me where once there was ultimate existential security, there was nothing. I lost it all. I lost the ultimate gift. And I didn't ask for that to happen. I didn't decide one day, I'm not going to believe in God anymore. Atheism was forced upon me against my will. Losing that infinite security left such a void that I've been struggling to fill, but I'm slowly learning to fill. But I don't think people talk enough about what it feels like to lose that. You know, it's one thing to grow up your entire life. Let's say you were never religious and you get a lot of training, you get a lot of practice in dealing with the finality of life. You get a lot of practice in generating purpose and meaning in more immediate things than looking ahead to the future at all times. Because that's what I was told to do. Set aside the flesh, set aside the now. Salvation lies ahead in the future. We're always looking that way. Can't center on yourself. And so when you lose that, when you lose what you've always been looking ahead to, and you're then forced to narrow your focus into the immediate, to yourself, to the now, it's terrifying. It's foreign. When I deconstructed, I was just cast out into the void, essentially. Floating around, reaching out for things, for people, to try and feel secure again, to try and generate meaning when I had no idea how to do that without God. A few days ago, I was thinking about all of this, and I was in a very vulnerable emotional state, and I began to experience an immense amount of fear in my body. And I was shaking, and my chest was buzzing, and I was sweating. And I had been thinking a lot about the stage immediately after my deconstruction. And I realized that I never, ever had dealt with the fear that I felt after that moment, after my deconstruction. The fear of being in this world that all my life I had been told was evil, dangerous, full of spiritual warfare that I couldn't see but knew was there. And because I had never really dealt with that, it was so overwhelming that I just shut it out and covered it up with things like reading, education, drugs, alcohol. just distractions for that fear that my body was experiencing, but my brain was not yet ready to allow me to experience fully. But the body keeps the score. And all these years later, the other day, I re-experienced that fear. But the difference was now I was in a very comfortable, safe environment, and I was able to process it. So it's possible. It's possible to grieve the loss of eternal salvation. I may never believe again. I don't think I ever will. When you're in that environment, the high control environment, for so long, and it's all you've ever known, when you finally break free of it, you look back in and you see it for what it is. I don't think there's ever any going back from that. I don't think I'm the kind of person who could escape the matrix, see it for what it is, and plug back in, because that's what it feels like to me now. When you go behind the curtain in The Wizard of Oz and you see how this has all been working, and you study it like I have, like I've studied religion relentlessly since I've deconstructed, because I've been desperate to understand how it works, understand what happened to me, how people used my brain against me. And once you gain that understanding, I don't know, you know, I try to have an open mind at all times for everything. And I as much as I profess that and strive for that, I consider it highly unlikely that I'll ever believe again. So what that leaves me with is having to confront the fact that I don't get to live forever. I once thought that I was going to live forever. When you lose that, man, I have to confront the fact that I can't spend eternity with my partner, my mother, my friends. I have to confront the fact that purpose and meaning are generated by us here on earth. Nothing has inherent meaning. It's always generated in our minds. Nihilism creeps in real fast. And I think if you want to conquer that, conquer the nihilism, you have to face it head on and accept its truth. But you do this so that you can set it aside and turn it into a superpower. Where you say, okay, there is no ultimate meaning, meaning no infinite reason for any of this. It's because of that that we strive to create beauty. We fight against the nihilism for the sake of it. And internalizing that is hard for me because it's just a completely exotic way of approaching life from what I was used to. I'm slowly learning to do it. I won't lie, there are waves of true nihilism, not this optimistic nihilism I've described, but true hopelessness, feeling like everything is completely pointless and there's no reason to go on. And when those waves hit, they hit hard. I've been real dark and really low. And a lot of people succumb to that. And I can't say that I blame them. When you're that dark and you can't possibly see what the point of any of this is, death gets really tempting. ending your existence when there's no reason not to you in that moment, is bliss. It's escape. It's the ultimate escape. I count myself fortunate that I've had the support to push through those moments, but a lot of people don't get that. I'm just lucky. When I was a kid, when I was an adolescent, really, and my life was falling apart around me, my family was crumbling. I was in a toxic, abusive environment. I attempted suicide more than once. I don't think I really wanted to die. I think I wanted to approach the thought of death, kind of testing the waters, because I was searching for any relief from the suffering I was experiencing. And that tentative brush with death became a coping mechanism for me. No matter how bad this gets, you can always make it stop. Now, what kept me from doing it ultimately was a few things. I mean, death is terrifying. It's scary. When you get to that moment, and if there's any part of you that still wants to live, it's going to yell real loud. And it did every time. I was also afraid that suicide was a sin, a really, really impactful sin, and could potentially doom my soul to hell for eternity. So, in a twisted way, religion kept me alive because it made me so afraid that I was going to experience even more suffering. So, there was no escape for me. I was born against my will. I was cast into a toxic environment against my will. And I couldn't even escape it with death because only more suffering awaited me at the end of that. But despite that, suicide, the idea of it, did become a coping mechanism. And when I started going to therapy and thinking about these things after deconstruction, I told my therapist very early that I didn't want to stop being able to think about suicide because of how much comfort it had brought me throughout half my life at that point. It was an old friend. It was like a warm blanket I could wrap myself in when I felt like things were getting too scary, too pointless, too much pain. And my therapist was amazing. He said, "Okay, we will work through that at your pace." And that's exactly what I needed to hear. Now, I don't think about suicide. I would say most of the time. When I'm at my very, very darkest, it does come back occasionally. Like I mentioned earlier, that night when I was re experiencing those feelings of fear I had right after deconstruction, I felt the urge to embrace the thought of my existence ending as a way to escape those feelings. I actually feel like that in that instance, I took a very big leap towards conquering this coping mechanism because something about the flavor of that suicidal ideation in that moment brought me right back to the suicidal ideation I had felt right after deconstructing. And I think my body was like I said, allowing me to re-experience all that fear, and with it came this overwhelming sense of I want to die that I had felt back then. But because I was in this new environment, I think I was able to process it. Say, I don't need you anymore. You want to live, you have goals, you have a life. So if anybody is struggling with the same thing, I hope I can represent a glimmer of hope for you. This shit's hard, man. Facing nihilism, facing coping mechanisms like suicidal ideation, it's hard. And doing it as somebody who once had all of that solved, nothing to worry about, and then to lose that, I don't think people talk about that enough. Now, there is a lot of research popping up about religious trauma, about the loss of these things, and I'm so grateful for that because it's really lonely out there. When you deconstruct, you leave your community. So, any chance of support you had is gone. Depending on your community, you can be demonized, literally. And family members, the people who are supposed to have your back no matter what, will push you out. So there you are, alone, floating in a sea of nihilism. No idea what any of this means, how any of it works. You weren't taught science, so you don't know how any of this got here. You thought you knew before, but that's all gone. You don't know how to deal with your emotions because emotions are of the self, they're worldly. You just gotta pray. Just send it all to Jesus, man. Just go to your Bible, read some verses, you'll feel better. Pray, figure out how you're sinning because that's probably why your life is hurting right now. Those are the tools you're given. And when you leave it all and you have to throw those tools away, as garbage as they were still all you had. And, sometimes they did bring some relief to you. I'm not going to deny that there is spiritual value in religion. You can find it in the Bible if you really need it. But when it's all gone, you got nothing. So you gotta make your own tools. You gotta craft your own way to fill the void that was left. And that's really hard. But it's possible. So I just want to encourage anybody who is feeling anything similar to me, no matter what stage in the journey you're in. My therapist always says, we're living in healing bodies. And what that means is, no matter what stage of that you're in, you can find other people who have either gone through it or are in the same phase as you. Because healing is a continual, dynamic process. Part of our fundamentalist religious brains is this thing where we have to stick a flag in things. Like, there's always this ultimate goal, very, very binary, black and white. You're either achieving this or you're in sin. You're a failure. You're fallen. But healing is not like that. And when we leave religion, we often set up that sort of binary expectation. It can be unhealthy. So no matter what phase of this journey you're in, I want you to know that you're doing really well, and you should celebrate and savor every moment you get, every pocket of clarity that you can reach out and take from this whirlwind of chaos that we're all trapped in. There are people like you. When you're in these high control communities, one of the most powerful things they can do to keep you in it is to set up this wall between you and the outside world and describe the outside world as easy, the easy way out, where you can live in sin, live for yourself, do whatever you want. That's a lie. As I've described this whole video, leaving my community, living on the outside was so much harder for me. To have to face the truth of reality, no more sugarcoating life with this shiny film of religion that just everything's in a nice little gift wrap box. All your answers are right here. You got a question, you got an answer. Here you go. Life outside of that is not so neat and tidy. You have to work incredibly hard to find answers, and there are often simply none. And that's hard to accept. When all your life, if you had a question, you could find an answer for basically anything, God did it. God's got a plan. The really hard questions, God works in mysterious ways. You can't question it. Outside of that, you got to work so hard to find answers. And like I said, sometimes there are none. And having to accept that is hard. All this to say is it's getting better for me every single day. It can get better for you. And if you feel like you relate to anything I've said, please let me know, because I will talk to you. You can message me. If you don't want to talk in public in the comment section, you can message me. I will talk to you. I don't think that there is a robust community for people like us because we weren't actually taught how to create community. We were just born into it in church and school. And it actually takes work. So I want to contribute to that. Yeah. So be encouraged. Be well. Know thyself. And we'll get through this.